All right, welcome everybody. I am so excited to present this overview of the CPG landscape in the US for UK brands. I'm here with my friend Rachel. Rachel, do you mind introducing yourself and maybe saying why you're interested in this topic today?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Rachel. I look after the UK SMB team here at NielsenIQ. So that's small and medium business brands. So we look after manufacturers who are based in the UK. And obviously, with you, we're looking forward to how we can learn to teach those brands to launch into the US.
All right, amazing. And I've seen some incredible things going on in the UK CPG market, which you guys would call FMCG. But there's a lot of cool stuff in the US market. And I know a lot of brands are looking at the US as maybe their second market or just really because it's such a big market and there's so many interesting trends going on. So the goal today is to give you guys really an overview of how does CPG work in the US, whether you're thinking about breaking into it or just a good refresher for you. So who are the key retailers? What are the key trends? How can you approach the market? What are all the costs of doing business? At the end of this, you will all understand that. So get ready to get your US CPG certificate. And here we go. Okay, so first, I just want to give you guys a little bit of an introduction to me because I'm going to be talking a lot throughout this thing. And you might wonder, like, do you really know this stuff? Yes, I know a lot of it. So this is a little bit about my background. So I am the founder of Startup CPG, which is the world's biggest community for CPG. We have a reach of about 200,000 now. We have this online Slack channel with over 30,000 entrepreneurs in the CPG space. We have the top global podcast on CPG. We love doing this stuff. We love just helping early stage brands. It's just what I love to do, what my whole team loves to do. So I then also up until 2023 was the CEO for a beverage company. So this company is called Machu Picchu Energy. I was the CEO from day one when it was just on a PowerPoint up into 2023, where we had gotten into about 3,000 stores in the US. So very fast growth. When I was there, it was the number one fastest growing brand in the natural channel. And just a lot of stuff to be really proud of and that I learned along the way. If you can see, like, we launched at Expo West, this big fun launch 2022 Expo West, which is the biggest trade show that happens in the US for natural products. The strategy was really one about regional growth and like natural, high end, conventional, which is a common one. Because this is an outdoor lifestyle brand, we were focused a lot on SoCal, LA, some of those classic retailers there like Gelson's and Erewhon and Mother's Market. But then also just getting into a bunch of the really nice chains around the country, especially more natural leaning or high end conventional ones. But I love Fresh Time Market. That's about 80 stores in the Midwest. Getting that Sprouts innovation set, all the cool stuff, as well as some e-com stuff. Just absolutely ripped. And I think for me, at the time, the key to us doing pretty well was definitely having a good product and good branding. Those are kind of table stakes, something that people would see as pretty innovative, especially as a category like this has become very competitive because of all the success of Celsius, those kind of companies. But we also had a really strong mission. I was teaching in public schools around the country, digitally and in person, and as part of our Do Good mission to teach kids entrepreneurship. That was a message that really resonated with not just consumers, but buyers, distributors, especially. And I'm heavy on LinkedIn. I really believe that the world can become very small when you can build a presence on LinkedIn and not be afraid to reach out to people and do it in the right way. And, just share excitement about your brand, and then heavy on trade shows as well. So those are the things that I love that worked really well for me. So overview, basics, US. This is what the US looks like. Probably a lot of you know that, but this will just give you kind of a regional breakdown for how we think about it. West, Midwest, Northeast, South. And you can kind of see the breakdown in terms of sales. So that's really interesting. If you look at that South region, well, big percentage there, a lot of that coming from Texas and Florida, and then just, East Coast, high purchase power as well. And you can see even like that West Coast region, which is so big geographically, is only 20.2% of sales, but has California, which is the number one market in general. So we're just so you can understand what these different regions are like, because like any country, they are really different culturally. South, I like to think of it in just, if you'll bear with me on some stereotypes, like it's hot and they like barbecues. The kind of products that do well in those kind of environments, they over-index on. So you can see like liquid beverages, paper and plastic stuff you might have at a barbecue. So, processed meat, fresh meat, all the kind of stuff you would have at that fun outdoor barbecue. You can think about that as doing pretty well in the South. especially like in the summer. Stuff that's cold will do pretty well there also because it gets very hot in the South. Okay, the West. Me, the stereotype would be like Kardashian, I don't know, high-end wellness influencer, Erewhon lifestyle. What over indexes? We've got wraps, tortillas and cosmetics and nail and grooming, facial skincare and yogurt, stuff like that I would consider very health and wellness oriented. Self-care over indexes in places like the West. Midwest. I live there. I love it. It's a really good, like wholesome, value-driven part of the country. And then you'll see those kind of products over indexing as well. Frozen pizza and lunch meat. You might have heard people from Wisconsin referred to as cheeseheads. Wisconsin, a state in the Midwest. So they over index on dairy cheese. A lot of cheese production coming from there. Can be very cold in the winter. So stuff that'll do well in the winter as well. Very popular. All right. And then just to wrap up here, Northeast. I live in New York City now. We're on the go. What does that mean? It means we're going to over-index on things like coffee, yogurt, to-go type items, cream and non-dairy creamers for our coffee on the go, out the door. That kind of stuff over-indexes in the Northeast region. For your modeling, because you're all going to build these models about what the market's going to mean to you, here's a breakdown of the different outlets. As a CPG brand, probably you're going to think most about grocery and mass. So grocery, which would include the natural channel, Whole Foods, that type stuff. Here's the number of stores you can think about when you're building your bottoms up model. Then what percentage of that are you going to capture? And also, that's just where a lot of the activity is in these stores. You do have some other channels that I would say aren't quite as relevant for you, especially in the early days, like drug channel, dollar channel. Club can be really good, but is also high effort, I would say, to get the right packs for them. And then speaking of modeling, I also want to make sure everybody understands the promotional environment because it is really different from country to country. I actually had the benefit when I was at Mars Chocolate of doing promotions around the world. I know it's very different in different countries. Like if you're in the Netherlands, you just could have so much volume being done on a BOGO. And I know in the UK, you've got pound price points that can be really hot. In the US in general, the average discount level you can see here across the different channels, as well as the promo activity. So 38% of units sold on deal in the entire food channel. So you're going to be paying for that. So good for you to remember that. If you walk into one of our grocery stores, we walk into like a Safeway, just everything there is on sale. So just be ready for that and the different channels to fund it. Typically, we'll get into some of the costs later, but they do expect for you to have that in your budget. And speaking of the retailers and knowing who to contact, here is a list that I put together, a big, beautiful map. And, if you were like playing Jenga, which hopefully you're familiar with, these are the ones that I think are like the blocks that are a little bit easier to push in because they're going to go, these ones are retailers that are a little bit friendlier to early stage brands. Rachel, you probably see some that you're familiar with on this map. But I think this is really useful because if you're interested, this is done by state, obviously, and then the national ones are over on the left. So they're not placed all throughout the map, but they're important to consider because they're spread everywhere. But let's say you're interested in launching in NorCal or SoCal, like Northern California, you can see all the way over on the left there. I've listed a lot of the ones that I think you should be hitting up on LinkedIn in the early days, as well as some in Southern California. And then, or if you're focused on the Northeast of the country, there are a bunch that I think you should be talking to. So I think this is a good kind of checklist to have, as well as some of those early stage ones that they will be more likely than others to talk to you at the early stage. Maybe you're coming from the UK and you already have built up a lot of success there and found product market fit. They're going to be interested to hear about that. Retailers notoriously are interested in proven success. So maybe you have that. Maybe you even have a good online community that you've already been building up. These are the ones who are going to be, I would say, easier to get a conversation with in the early days or just more popular or relevant for early stage brands. So hopefully that is helpful for you guys. I consider it really money slide. Here is another money slide that I put together with the Nielsen team. And by the way, you're going to see a lot of data in here that is proprietary to Nielsen. So we really thank the NielsenIQ team for making this available to us because it's just not often seen in this way before. So what we did here, this is a really cool chart because there are so many retailers out there. And there are things like slotting fees out there that you have to pay to get into stores. So I wanted to map out here for all these different retailers, what is the amount of dollars per buyer that they have on an annual basis? And then what's the penetration of their stores? So, you can see up at the top right, Walmart. Okay, people go there. The people who shop at Walmart spend a lot of money and they're like penetrated everywhere. So they're up in that top right. It's going to be a, big kind of expensive chain to work with, but with, there's a lot there if your brand is ready for a mass market retailer like that. I really like also these top left quadrant retailers because what it means is, they're like not quite as penetrated. Maybe they're regional, not everywhere, but the people who shop there are spending a lot of money. They're buying big baskets. They're going there frequently, which means like getting in there, you could potentially really build a brand at some of those stores because they're big basket shops. Hopefully you won't be paying too much on slotting. And then if, conversely, if you look down at the bottom, places like Dollar General, CVS, Walgreens, Family Dollar, like people who shop there might be kind of popping in for something or being there occasionally. They're not necessarily buying so much at one time or going so often or just, quite spending as much. So they may not be as high priority accounts for people at the beginning. What do you think, Rachel? Formative, overwhelming?
I think it's really informative, maybe a little bit overwhelming trying to work out which ones are the best, but it's definitely the previous map I think is really, really, really helpful, just knowing which ones are open to hearing from challenger brands.
Yep. And we'll get into a little bit later, the strategy. So, okay, do I just pop a shot at every single one of these? Like, probably not, because then you'll run out of your money. And you do want to consolidate and have a strategy. So we'll come back to that in just a little bit here. Okay, so speaking of the strategy, actually, let's just get right into it. So a couple different strategies that I see out there. It's not a comprehensive list, but I would call these some of the main ones that people talk about. The first that I love for early stage brands, you don't have a ton of money that you're just going to be blowing everywhere, win in your own backyard. Now, this will be a little bit different for UK brands, but you can still, I think, try to set up a stronghold in the US. But this is really all about okay, if you're based in SoCal, maybe start in SoCal. And if you don't have a huge CPG background or a lot of money, walk into the store near you and try to get into that store and then tell them you're going to demo and then ask them who their distributor is, get into that distributor and ask that distributor, who do you distribute to, and try to go to sell to those stores and just start leaping from one lily pad to the next. And just, you can really accelerate that way. And there are great local programs for some stores. So Whole Foods Local program is a great one to talk about. They have a foraging team across the country that is looking to highlight local brands on favorable terms. A lot of retailers have those kind of local programs wherever you are, whether it's Fresh Time in the Midwest. So, be on the lookout for those things. And then, figure out how to leverage the retailer and the distributor in conjunction to just try to build both of those things. And then, I like this because you can test and learn. You're going to learn things about your product in the US market, even if it's successful in the UK. A little bit different here. We might not already know all the things that people love about your product in the UK. And you're going to figure out things about the messaging. So this also is kind of a staged approach where you can be in there and demo and learn and change things. So I like it. High end, also a great strategy. If you're coming in with a lot of cash and you want to kind of go everywhere into all the nice stores and build up a really good data story along the way, I like this high end approach. So it's something that I think you saw with Poppy and Beyond Meat. They really were targeting high end natural channel. And they're all over the country, right? You saw on that map, a lot of great natural accounts all over. The benefit of these natural accounts is, they're going to have good traffic and probably not quite as many SKUs in the store as something, let's say like a Safeway. You go into Safeway, I don't know the exact number, but there might be 100,000 products in that store. And it doesn't have per square foot or whatever the same traffic as some of these natural channel stores. So the velocity is lower. So it'd be hard for you to try, even if you could get into a Safeway at the early days, which is tough, it would be hard for you to have good data to then convince the next retailer, I'm good, you should want me on shelf. But natural stores, that's a big part of it. You're getting in there, you can talk about being in there. It really matters to the other chains. And then hopefully you build a good data story because you're in there and you're participating in the programs, you're doing demos, whatever you got to do. And then just building a groundswell there. Maybe you're going national on that. But just remember, the downside of doing natural channel everywhere is you got to support it everywhere. So all of a sudden you're responsible for supporting a chain in the Pacific Northwest and you don't live there. And, you got to build awareness kind of everywhere, which means it's going to mean a lot of point of sale marketing through the store, like doing programs that they have. So the shoppers in the store at least can learn about your brand through promotions, through demos, stuff like that. Last one here, maybe a couple of you have the cash for this. A lot of people don't. It's go big or go home. It's sort of like, this is my moment. I'm going everywhere right now, everywhere, all the way with everything. So I think you've seen that with Prime and Feastables, David Bar, where they're just, there's cash already, big fundraise. They just want to go everywhere. And so lots of different channels, conventional, convenience, like everything. And, if you have the money to do that and you really feel like this is the time, then, good on you. There are a lot of really experienced salespeople who know how to do this effectively. I am not one of those. But, I think just again, just an accelerated version of the risks of the previous one, which are like, okay, but you need so much money to support all this stuff. And you have so many distribution costs that you're going to have to pay for and supporting the business everywhere because, you really want to be successful. I think the benefit is you get all these impressions by being on shelf everywhere because that is people pay for digital marketing impressions all the time, but being on shelf, you get those also just from people seeing your product everywhere. And if it's turning, it's turning. That's kind of the main thing. Like, you see this with David, but it's also right now, it's just kind of sold out everywhere also. So, at least for now, it seems to be working well for them. What do you think, Rachel? Is this, you think this would be kind of similar in the UK, or do you think there would be really different types of approaches people would look at?
I think it's really similar, actually. Yeah, I think it goes back to your map of the US that was showing the different places which would be more likely to purchase certain products. And I think that's really, really useful knowledge in this instance because it would help the plan of where you're going to launch. So yes, you may not be based in the US, but if you're going to look at winning in your own backyard, you're going to want to pick the region where your product is likely to sell better.
Yeah, and everyone will have their own tweak on this, but also just in terms of like how you actually get into the market, because obviously with a couple of exceptions, mainly the distributors are different in the countries, although I think UNFI has a presence also. So we talk about a couple different kinds of distribution. Probably the first one will be most relevant for foreign brands, but these are called broadliners. So especially like natural channel and conventional, like UNFI and KeHE are the big two. UNFI is the primary distributor for Whole Foods nationally, and they have a really good deal, which is not too big of a markup for anyone trying to get into Whole Foods. And then KeHE, just very, very high-end distributor, hits tons of the stores on the map that I showed a second ago. So the pros of these are if you're trying to scale really fast, they just go to most of the stores that I showed in the previous slide on that map. And so they have programs also to work with early stage brands that are really cool, like the UNFI Up Next program. KeHE has a bunch, including Elevate, New at KeHE, to onboard high potential new brands and try to really help them scale. There are costs to this that you really have to model out and be aware of. We'll talk about some of them, but there are costs to being in every distribution center. There are, costs to then doing promotions through them. You need to have these off invoice windows where the product is on discounts so that people to encourage sell through to the retailers. So there's a lot there, but also if you're trying to go big and fast, these guys, you can get in there. The next one, the direct store delivery route, they can be very powerful. I think they can be a little bit harder to get into because they really don't have as much warehouse space, and they need to make sure often that you're bringing them accounts already to get in those stores. But they do a good job, especially if you're like a beverage that can need to be merchandised often. Sometimes direct store delivery can be a really good route to go because they're not just like usually DSDs aren't just delivering into the back of the store. They actually deliver into the cooler, for example, and you pay more. They're going to take more of a markup than somebody like a UNFI or KeHE, but they're also adding a little bit more service there. But again, yeah, not all of them are going to want to work with you. If you talk to some of the brands that I've even highlighted or the distributors that I've highlighted on here, they're going to want to know like, all right, what accounts are you giving me? And can I have exclusivity in that region? And then you can't go work with one of these other guys, even if you want to, because I'm building this business with you. So I would say broadliner is much more common, but some of the veterans in the industry, people who are more comfortable, have more experience with the accounts, might be going the DSD route. They can be done in conjunction if you're just trying to get really good coverage and pick up different accounts, but just good to really understand the terms of those agreements. And including on DSDs, you can get locked into a contract with them where it's like, all right, but if you ever leave me, you owe me 3 years revenue because I've built now this brand for you and all these retailers that I have access to in LA. So, if you eventually want to get out of that and sell to like AB and Bev, you better pay me for that. So all of that. And then self-distribution, I would say least common, but people always ask about it. Like, oh, could I just distribute myself? It's tough. Like you're now in the business of being a distributor, which is difficult to manage. You got to hire reps, manage reps, and that they like aren't just going to do the thing that you hope they do. Like you really have to manage people. And in a place like New York, LA, like getting around the city is very tough. It can be incredibly inefficient for one person to sit in traffic to do like one delivery, and also they have to sell at the same time. So, the big CPGs who have their own distribution all have a very big advantage because obviously, I mean, it's really cost effective and they're selling in their own products. Coca-Cola, Keurig, Dr. Pepper, those kind of people can do it. And I've talked to some early stage brands that have done it. And even if they were successful doing it, most of them are like, in retrospect, I probably would have gone with a small distributor and just not had to worry about all that stuff. But sometimes you don't have that option. So people do what they're going to do. Fees, our favorite. Get out your checkbooks, people. But I want you to model all this stuff into your Excel because there are a lot of fees. In like retail, you could have 15% in club that they're going to take on margin, like, below where the price to the consumer is, or it could be like 40% or more in convenience. So you need to know that. You need to know also a lot of them are going to charge you slotting fees, also known as free fill, which is you give them one case per store per SKU at the wholesale cost. That's the price that the distributor would be charging them. So that can get expensive. You can try to negotiate it, but sometimes you're successful, sometimes you aren't. Promo fees, maybe 20% of your revenue. So just good for you to have that ready, build it out. Ad fees, they'll ask you for a lot of that stuff. Certain retailers will ask you for a whole bunch of stuff that you have to figure out how to politely dance away from without offending them. And then, distributor fees can be 8% if it's UNFI to Whole Foods, or if it's UNFI or KeHE distributing to like a one store chain somewhere, it might be as high as 33%, something like that. And you do need to have those quarterly promo periods, which is part of that overall promo fee bucket, I would say. Broker fees, if you feel like you really want someone to help you out, to just blast you off into the channel, it could be $10K a month even. Merchandising fees, it's not a necessity, but some brands will opt for it. And then all these marketing and trade show costs. So just know how it is. I know the whole this industry is hard, but we love it. It's funny. In a lot of ways, it's never been harder to be a CPG, I would say, because of the funding environment. And also in a lot of ways, it's never been a better time because all of these retailers are looking for innovation right now. The innovation sets that some of them have launched now, they're all rallying around. My view personally is just because I think that they all understand that the thing that's going to keep people coming in grocery stores in the long run is discovery, product discovery, curated cool stuff that they can come in and find and learn about. And they associate that with the store and the joy of being in the store. So more and more of that is just happening now as emerging brands, I think, only accelerate the pace at which they're taking share from legacy brands. So exciting, but challenging, but let's go. We love it. So speaking, of the like keeping people in store. So, I mean, online is growing and it's hit food and beverage less than a lot of other stuff. But, any way you look at it, you just need to be prepared to sell in the online world. The share just, this is really growing fast. It has disrupted some things that might be like higher price point or higher quality concerns, or maybe just not as heavy, so it can be shipped better in different percentages. So you can see like food is all the way down there where it's only 10% online now, but it's growing at 16%, whereas baby is already at 45%. So a lot of penetration already there, but just good to think about as you figure out your e-com strategy. Things like Instacart in the US can be really valuable, where they actually, you order through the app Instacart, but then they're like sending shoppers into those retailers and picking up the product and delivering it to you, which is a cool service that I use. If you don't love waiting in lines, but do want nice produce from your favorite grocery store. So TikTok has been really disruptive in some categories, not yet as much in others, but you can see health and beauty live selling. It's like made for that, influencer videos, and it's high margin and it's not that heavy and it's high price point. So the economics for doing it online really makes sense. Whereas if you look at food, it just hasn't done it in the same way, I think, because I don't know, it's not quite as visual. Like you can see food, it can look appealing and you can tell people about it, but it's heavy to ship also, especially beverage. It doesn't always work out with the economics. You don't have the same incentive for the seller as you would with something like health and beauty. But this will keep growing in the years to come. Retailers. So private label is just so interesting to me. This is the part that I really like to focus on. The retailers care a lot about it because it can be very high margin for them. And I know this happens a lot in the UK as well. But the share keeps growing The really interesting thing for me, and I actually was just at like the biggest conference for all the private label manufacturers in the country, and there are a lot of retailers there, but you see really big differences across the different categories. Look at milk, for example. The share all the way over on the left of private label is 51%. Now look all the way over to the right for candy, it's 3.2%. Why is that? It's so interesting. And I used to work for Mars Global Chocolate. So I spent a lot of time in the UK doing that. In the US, I mean, like if I think about that company, what is their advantage? It's like they have a very strong brand and they are an incredible manufacturing machine because they can get a Snickers bar all the way across the country to a mass market chain where the price is really low and they're still probably making like, I don't even know the number, but 70% margin off it. And then they have all that money to throw in building the brand. So they're doing Super Bowl commercials. Now, something like milk, you don't really see that as much. And even like in dairy, there aren't really a lot of national egg brands, for example. It just doesn't really happen that way. They don't have the marketing budgets, a lot of disruption in private label. So it really is worth just thinking about there, like what is the strength of the brand in different categories. That'll tell you a lot about private label disruption. Because it's not complicated to make those candy bars. You know, like you could make that at home. I see people make them, but it just what it makes it so defensible is the branding. Okay, a lot of you will have cool things about your products. Probably if you're like our community in the US, you're maybe doing a better for you version of something or trying to improve something somehow. And you might have some claims and you could see what claims are really growing or penetrated in the US. So along the left-hand side, what we have here is the 4-year compounded annual growth rate for sales for different claims. And then on the right is the penetration, meaning how many of the categories in CPG if they really hit. And so there's some pretty interesting ones here to pay attention to, like all that tiny little dot all the way to the top left, regenerative organic certified. This is really a discussion a lot, I would say more in the industry. A lot of people are pretty excited about this, but you don't see it in a lot of categories yet. I think people are still figuring out the supply chains and consumer awareness isn't totally there yet. But that and like upcycled are both ones I would say to keep an eye on, especially if they can be successful in getting consumers to care more about it. But a lot of like very early interesting growth there. And look all the way over onto the right and you see organic, very penetrated. That's very well recognized by consumers. They understand the organic promise. So, you know, that's a much more mature claim, I would say, as well as non-GMO, which actually has a fewer requirements than organic. I would say it's like organic is like non-GMO plus some other stuff you have to do. So non-GMO, little bit easier to get, so a little bit bigger in terms of the sales there. But again, very well recognized by people. Interesting to see because probably a lot of you are like searching for the claim that you have and you can just see here what's going on with it. So this slide this was dated May of 2024. So it shows you at that point in the year prior, what actually grew the most. And this is ranked from top left to bottom right. Pretty interesting. There's been this fragrances revolution, like this self-care ritual that just absolutely blew up. And a lot of that because of social media, I think, but it wasn't really even at the premium price points. It's not super high-end stuff entering the market, but a lot of just like body mists, stuff like that, you know, accessible self-care that really just made that overall category rip. And then spirits, beer, wine, RTDs, ready to drink. That, you know, just following the whole kind of White Claw wave, continue to grow, you know, just you see it everywhere. I think beverages overall, beverages as an accessory, that kind of stuff, continuing to drive just that whole area. Baking supplies, kind of a COVID leftover, I would say, or carryover when people really got into making sourdough at home, stuff like that. Health and performance, biohackers, all this stuff. Hydration, protein to the max. That stuff just keeps going up and up. So we'll keep seeing a lot of that. And then I love this one from the Nielsen team, which is ingredients. So same thing, left y-axis is going to be 4-year CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, and then penetration across the bottom. So Rachel, I'm curious if you see any ingredients here that are interesting to you, but like this.
I have to tell you, we were literally just talking about L-theanine in the office. Yeah, we were talking about magnesium 3 and 8, all that kind of stuff. So yes, 100%.
What did everyone say about L-theanine?
Oh, we were just talking about which supplements generally do help aid sleep. So we were saying lots of us were finding that we go to lay down to sleep and we just can't fall asleep. So we were talking about who's tried and tested things that actually have had a benefit for them.
It's so hard to know just from a personal perspective. I've like taken magnesium, but then I stopped. I'm like, well, I think it helped, but I'm not sure. But there's a lot of stuff out there, and really interesting the overlay here of the TikTok hashtags from the team. So if you look at creatine all the way at the bottom left, so there wasn't really a lot going on there, but look how many mentions it has on the hashtag. And this is from April 2024. I think since then, creatine has exploded. And I think this would have showed you that, like, oh, creatine's about to go. And I think it really has. Almost like so many people I know now have started taking creatine the last 2 years, including me.
And me.
Because, yeah, like it just, for a lot of different reasons. And so I think these kind of charts can really help you understand what people are talking about. Look at all the ones on collagen there, which we've seen explode as well. So really interesting just to see what's going on in the different ingredients across all the different categories there. This is not exhaustive, but it is very cool. Okay, cool. Good news if you're doing something organic, which is it is really up across the board, which is also cool in this inflationary environment because, a lot of people will look to trade down in some areas, but also really interesting to me, huge difference across categories here. Like, look at the meat. What's happening in organic meat where it's gone up 25% over the prior year? Whereas if you look at, still really good growth in grocery overall at, 6% on dollars and 5% on units. But meat, whoa. All right. I guess people are just getting really tuned into the quality of the meat that they are taking in. So pretty interesting to see. And then if you look all the way over on the right, more pet care are caring less about their pets. My dog's in the background here. I'm like, we love pets, sorry. But maybe people not caring quite as much about giving organic stuff to the pets. But that is also has always been a really under-indexed part of organic as a whole, as you can see by that bottom number. But shout out to pets. All right. So also, if you are one of these organic brands, good to know, like, you are valuable to the stores. Because when you're pitching retailers, the thing that resonates the most with retailers in general is, I am going to bring you incremental business. And you can do that a couple different ways. You can bring new people into the store. That's the best thing. Like, let's say you have a big online presence and you can say, like, I'm going to post that I'm in your store and everyone's going to run into the store. There are going to be crazy lines like it's Black Friday here, which is our biggest holiday for discounts. Like, that's what's going to happen when I tell everyone I'm selling in your store. That's the retailer's ultimate dream, because retail's a tough game, and the whole name of the game is getting new people into the store. Second to that would be, okay, I want people we have to like buy more, meaning like, okay, they are in the store, but they don't shop in my category. Like, let's say I'm a beverage. They don't really buy a lot of ready to drink beverage. So, okay, I'm going to bring them into your set in the store. That ready to drink buyer cares about that. Or I'm just going to get them to buy more often. All of these things are stories about incremental revenue that you can tell. Organic buyers, very valuable to the store. They just in general are spending more money. It makes more sense because organic products are more expensive, but they just have a higher basket size and buy rate for products overall. So good if you can tell that story about bringing them into other stores. And, the evidence does show that people will pay more for stuff that is, organic or just that has a bunch of health and wellness claims on it. So you can see the ranking of things that they're willing to pay more for here in case you align with one of those. All right. So pretty interesting data here from the NielsenIQ annual Green Gauge report, which if you look from 2010 to 2024, it's pretty interesting. This is about, how interested people are in the stuff that has these environmental claims. The biggest one was in this kind of second group, because this is all about like your likelihood to purchase stuff on claims. And this second group that is really changing the most here is like people who are like, yeah, okay, I am going to buy it, but it's more of a like honor status symbol rather than that top group that's like, we are so interested in this legitimately. So whatever's happening, people are actually more interested in stuff that is green in this way, which is good. All of the cynics at the bottom, they have decreased overall as a percentage. So good shift, I would say, for our industry overall. Interestingly, when it comes to ESG, environmental social groups responsibility, the biggest thing that I see on this is actually the repeat rate. So the repeat rate really actually increases on these high ESG type products, which makes sense to me because there are a lot of brands where I might not even have known their social mission when I bought them the first time, like a Patagonia jacket. And then you learn, do you know you can actually just, if you rip it, you just mail it to them anytime. 10 years later, they'll just fix it and send it back to you because they really care about the environment. They don't want you to go and buy another coat. That's very beautiful to me. It makes me more likely to buy stuff from them in the future. I think people like Liquid Death might be something like that, where people might just be like, oh, it's cool. It's what? And then you learn about it. Oh, death to plastic. And some people might, really get on board with that mission. And then the repeat rate goes up and they tell people about it. Probably a lot of people know we've had this like big debate around things like seed oils here. I don't know. Has that hit the UK as much, Rachel?
Yeah, definitely the ultra processed foods where, everyone's talking about that now.
All right. We've got an ultra processed food certification now coming out from the same company that does non-GMO, Project Verified. A lot of interesting discussion here. And, whatever way you fall on that debate, it is being talked about a lot. And even at the state level, which can get really complicated also if they pass certain bills in a state banning something. It's sort of like with car laws and like gasoline stuff in the US. Like when California passes something, basically it just has to be nationwide because the manufacturers can't make one level of thing for California and something else for the rest of the country. So states can be incredibly influential when they act on their own to ban something. So hopefully they'll at least do it in conjunction, or we can get some kind of agreement on this so that brands know what really is in and out. And hopefully it is based in science. All right. Shoppers do care. They are very aware of this stuff right now, and especially the younger generations. So, I mean, how do they check for, especially artificial ingredients have become a hot button. So they're looking at the labels. They really are. Well, you can see that on the left-hand side here, looking for specific claims. And then on the right, you can see like who's really looking at a lot of that stuff and where do they actually get their information. I mean, and look at that Gen Z social media boom. Like they really are looking online to get information about products and what might be artificial. And if you ever have spent time on TikTok or Instagram, if you're like me, my feed is full of that kind of stuff, like influencers talking about stuff that they've discovered that's in products. So that's out there. GLP-1, huge disruptor. So many people that I know are on it and swear by it, but pretty interesting what it actually does to their overall eating habits. Because like people on GLP-1 get then very over-indexed on things like organic. Maybe, I don't know the exact reason why, but if you're putting less into your body overall, maybe you just like become really focused on what it is because you are not consuming the same amount. So really care about what it is that you do consume. So they care a lot about the free from type claims. Yeah, things like organic, energy, muscle health, all of that stuff. Just given the penetration there, it's good for everyone, I think, to be aware of that stuff. So yeah, I just want to draw your attention to a couple resources that we've created. Startup CPG, we just help brands for free. There is no catch there. Like, this is why we exist. We love to help all the brands. We create these resources and just send them out to you because we want you to be successful. This retail sales tracker, for me, is the best thing that we've ever done. So all those retailers on that map that I showed at the beginning, we've created an Excel spreadsheet with all of them, including their locations, how to submit to them online, what distributors they pull out of. That will help you with your strategy. As you grow, you can get these off of our website, startupcpg.com, under founder resources, or click that QR code here. We've got a broker database if you're looking for a broker, distributor, warehouse database. We're about to release a new product developer formulator database. So we just want you to find the best partners, and we don't want you to feel alone. So if you are sitting there somewhere in the UK and you're like, how could I do the US market? I don't even know who the players are. Well, now you do. And now you know us, and we're here to help you. And here are all the resources that we give to you because we love you and we want you to be successful, or we at least don't want the reason that you're not successful to be because you didn't have access to the right resources. And one of the best resources that we have in the community is our partnership with NielsenIQ. So we partner with NielsenIQ in so many ways in different parts of the world, but we really love partnering with them just because overall, I would say they really have done a lot to democratize data. And as somebody, I've spent a lot of my life pulling data. When I was at a food tech company called Just Egg, I was the guy who pulled the data and paid heavy six figures to do that all the time. Like the data was very expensive back in those days. And the data has come way down and become much more accessible for early stage brands. And I think we really have NielsenIQ to thank for a lot of that. So when you're trying to get comps on like how you're, what the landscape is and, what velocity, average sell through rates are and who the competitors are, all that kind of stuff, talk to NielsenIQ. They will help you out. Rachel, what do you think?
I think it's brilliant. I was even going to ask the questions about where they could find out this information. So you've answered everything.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of support do you typically give for brands in the UK who are thinking about markets abroad?
So we have our global snapshots team in the UK who can help with kind of a data dip into different markets. We also have SMB teams in 73 markets globally and growing. So we can intro, if a brand is working with us, then we can intro them into the team in another country and they can help support. And obviously that local knowledge is really valuable. So, when we're working with brands from other countries, we can help them understand which retailers they should be looking at in the UK and vice versa. So I think that's really, really useful.
So just after having looked at this presentation, when it comes to the UK, what do you think some of the biggest differences might be for brands looking at how the UK market works versus the US market in terms of
I think
number of retailers or the power of the retailers, the power of the distributors, the fees?
Yeah, the fees definitely are a lot, I think, in the US in comparison to the UK. I think distribution, I suppose, it's not something you necessarily think about in the UK as being, it's not as difficult to distribute across the country because obviously we're so much smaller. So even when you were speaking, I was thinking, I've never really considered that. Like to get your product across the entire country it's a humongous task. And when you said about Coca-Cola distributing themselves, you're thinking, how could anyone do that? So I think those are the biggest standouts for me that, they're wildly different. And I guess the different regions, you might have a few things that are different, sort of Scotland having, more kind of haggis, black pudding, pies and things we see up there, but not necessarily as much in kind of England perhaps. And I suppose, but they're such small differences, I think, whereas they're really, really big differences in the US. So I suppose knowing where you're kind of landing your product is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think because it's just such a big country and really the cultural differences can be quite strong. Yeah, I don't, yeah, maybe it's just so big, we feel like, because we are really, I don't know. I mean, just so many people came to this country from different places and each region really can have its own identity. And even each state, there are some states like Texas, people would, I think, usually be like, oh, like if you meet them, somewhere, they'd be like, where are you from? They'd be like, Texas. Whereas a lot of people would say, I'm from the US. They're like, no, I'm from Texas. They have strong identities.
Yeah, my friends have, and the other thing that's been really on a personal for me is my friends from America coming over and they were so surprised because they live in North Carolina. They were really surprised to see alcohol in the supermarket. And that's totally normal for us. I would never even given it a second thought. And to think there are states where you would have to go to the liquor store to purchase, spirits and things like that is really different.
Yeah, there are a lot of funny regulations in the US, and I know there's a whole reason why they are that way, but a lot of we don't need to get into the whole 3-tier system that we have here in the US where you have to there are a lot of rules around alcohol distribution.
Yeah.
That can be quite confusing, but it's the way it is. But the road is tough, but the rewards are high in the US because they're obviously, I mean, it's just there's such scale, high purchasing power, huge market, really open for innovation. So there are so many breakthrough brands we've seen so many examples of with these big acquisitions. But it's not easy. I think you've hit it because that is what I've heard from brands also that I've talked to even really recently. They're like, hey, I'm considering launching in the UK or in the US. The UK is a lot easier for me. Like, okay, I'm based there and I can get some good distribution and the fees are not that bad, but it doesn't have the same potential as if you can really start ripping nationally in retail, but also, in e-com. It's just not as big of a market. And I know shipping cross-border then for other countries can get a little complicated as well. So Anyways, I hope that this has been really helpful for everybody. Would love to hear from anyone. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. But I, again, just want to thank the Nielsen IQ team for making all of this possible with all of this amazing data, which they have for 73 markets around the world, which I've gotten for a lot of them, having gotten the chance to work with them in China and just, Germany, tons of countries. So thank you. Thank you, Rachel, as always, for the support here and letting us do what we love to do, which is help emerging brands.
Thank you so much.
All right. Catch you later, everyone.